the self-worth that we attach to our success, And I realized, I'm working too hard. Like I'm working to make this
Yeah,
happen, as opposed to just allowing, like giving it to God and allowing him to do what he's going to do with it. And just to
right.
be honored to be included in what he's asked me to do here. So
Sabbath will expose it all.
yeah.
It brings it all to the surface where you're like, oh no, am I trying to achieve being your child? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yikes,
Yeah.
I can't believe it. And you don't think so because you're like,
Right.
God, I'm just trying to serve you. And he's like, putting way more effort into doing than being.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. The doing will flow from the being.
That's
Like you
right.
still have to do. Faith without works is dead.
That's
However,
right.
there's not only works, the
Yeah.
faith is that living in the beauty of what he's already provided and allowing that to really be where that bearing comes from. It's
Hmm.
like you work on the soil, that whole fruit, the fruit will come,
Yeah.
and so it affects everything. You start to realize, oh, it's not just Sabbath, it's in everything,
Hmm.
it's
I'm thrilled you're here with us on The Christian Clinician, where we join faith with evidence-based medicine to revitalize your health and renew your faith. Get ready for real and informative conversations with wellness experts and Christian scholars alike to gain a deeper understanding of our faith, explore our God-given purpose, and discover how the strength of our relationship with God can impact our health here on earth. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Christian Clinician. I'm your host, Dr. Tanya Paynter, and today I am with Dr. Natasha Tubbs. She's an adjunct professor specializing in apologetics and leadership at Mana University in North Carolina. She's a writer with Women in Apologetics and an AI expert contributor, helping to train AI in religious studies. And she's also shifting into UX design and Python programming. I didn't know what that was, but it apparently helps to develop human-centered, ethically informed AI tools. So she's trying to put an ethical spin on the AI tools that are starting to become so prominent. So, welcome, Dr. Tubbs. How are you?
good. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation. So we're going to be talking about Sabbath and the importance of Sabbath and how it transformed your life. And your story is so amazing. Um, can you just tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and kind of what you were struggling with before the Sabbath took hold of you?
Absolutely. Well, it probably goes back much further than I realize. I think when you find yourself in like a burnout type situation, you can kind of believe it just started, but it actually goes way back to just the habits we develop, the rhythms we apply just in our day-to-day life. For me, I'll say about 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with a nerve condition, and it was catastrophic for someone who was just starting to teach, starting to write,
Mm,
starting to do conferences and different opportunities where I was able to minister to women in different arenas. And the pain was on the left side of my face that made it difficult to speak and all of that. Over the years, I started to have to use lots of medication, lots of things that really changed the way I had to teach, had to write,
mm,
because most of the time I just simply couldn't physically. And so that obviously puts a strain on you spiritually because you start to ask God, why would you allow these opportunities, but then also allow all of these hurdles at the same time?
yeah.
And so at about 2022, we had moved as a family to Hawaii from North Carolina. We were so burned out where we were. I was in full time ministry. My husband was in the military. And COVID kind of really gave us a realization that we
Mm,
were doing way more than we had really the grace to do. You think because you can do more that you should, and that really isn't true. And
that's so
so
good. Can you repeat that?
you think you can do more than you really can do.
Yeah.
And so I started to just really experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of just overwhelming sense of I'm way in over my head. And for
Mm,
someone like me as high impact leader, I'm always like adding more, deeper things,
hmm.
more study, more opportunities. I started to really realize that I was confusing my capability with the grace that God had actually given me to say yes and to say no to things.
Mm-hmm.
I was just saying yes to everything because I
Mm-hmm.
could.
Because you
I
can.
was
Yeah.
able to. So I did. And I'm like, oh, God's great, presenting me with opportunities. I can say yes to all of them because he's given me free will to do so. But my body was saying absolutely not. That was not working. And so at the same time, I was finishing up my doctorate and had to come face to face with the reality of I don't really have what it takes anymore. Like I'm burning out. Like I have
Mm.
nothing left. I'm anxious. I all of these things that are contrary to who I say I am, And so I was faced with an opportunity to study the Sabbath. And when I did, I had no idea what it would do, not just for me, but for my family, for the
Mm.
way we did life, for the way we saw life. And so during that time of study, God really revealed you are working way past the capacity that I've given you. You are confusing your ability with the grace I've given you for each season. And when we started to apply the Sabbath, we started to go, wait a minute.
Mm.
24 hours doesn't mean I use 24 hours of my day. It means I need to really recognize when I begin, when I end, where God begins, where he ends. I started to have to realize my relation to God was backwards. I was the
Mm.
author and finisher of my life, and I
Mm-hmm.
added him. And even though I was teaching about faith, even though I was in churches, in universities, I still had it backwards. And so now, about 4 years later, we've recognized Sabbath is not something for us that's just a day. It's a whole way of life of observing who God is, the part that he plays in our life, and the part that we play. And our part is much smaller than we think it
Yeah.
is.
Right.
It's impactful, but it's much smaller than we think it is. And I'm really intentional to not just observe Sabbath for us as a family, but even the way I interact with others I spend time with. And so it's radically shifted just our idea of rest and work and their relationship and the beauty of their relationship together, that they're not
Mm.
contrasting against each other, but both are necessary and you can't have one without the other. And
Mm.
so here we are today.
So I'm curious how you define Sabbath because you just said Sabbath isn't just a day. It's a
Right,
way of life. Can you
right.
talk to that a little bit?
Sabbath is so many people see just the Sabbath. They go to Genesis and they see the Sabbath. Okay, this is the seventh day. This is the day, the only
Mm-hmm.
day.
Mm-hmm.
But when we do that, like all of Scripture, we pull it out of context. And you think of 7 days, you can't do something one day and then not think it's going to impact the other days. You think about, I don't know, at our age now, with all of our kids, you're thinking, one day of staying up till midnight, I'm going to suffer for another 2 days until my body gets back in rhythm. That's what the Sabbath does. When you rest for those 24 hours, it impacts the way you do the other days so that you're not crashing into that seventh day. Instead, it's defining everything you do the other days. And then those other days lead into Sabbath all over again. And it's just this rhythm that continues and continues that you recognize that 24 hours is so essential for the stopping and the pausing. But now throughout the week, I have to consider how I pause, how I say
Mm.
yes, how I say no, because if I don't, I won't really live out the beauty that I gained from that 24 hours.
Mm.
Instead, I'll completely miss everything. I'll kind of think it's just that day. Kind of like a vacation. People go on vacation, they enjoy the rest, and they go back to work and they get right back into all of
Mm-hmm.
the things that are monotony, all of the things that stress them out until the next vacation. And we can't treat Sabbath that way. We have to recognize what I do in that one day is going to flow through the other days and vice versa.
So, so what I hear you saying is you're taking pieces of that one 24-hour Sabbath and
Right,
you are implementing them into Monday through Saturday
right,
or Sunday through Friday, however you look at whatever Sabbath day you're choosing.
right.
And so you're taking pieces of that Sabbath and you are experiencing Sabbath on every single day. It's just not a 24-hour period of Sabbath.
Right, right.
Hmm.
So we do assign our family that 24 hours, which we'll get to, I'm sure, in our conversation, but it can sometimes not be 24 hours just because life doesn't allow it. But we do make sure that time we do commit, we commit. And
Mm.
from that time, how does that affect us Monday? I know I have a full schedule ahead. What can I say yes to? What can I say no to? Where am I intentionally acknowledging that God is the beginning and ending all things, not me. You know, so
Hmm.
those lessons you've learned from that time that you set aside now affect your everyday.
So how does that look practically for you?
Well, it really is a season thing. When we were living in Hawaii, you know, we're living on an island by the beach, and so 24 hours is 20 full 4 hours. But now we're back into the grind of living. My husband works away from home, and we have two kids that are away, two kids that are here that have very busy schedules with marching band and all of these other things. And so it's easy to go, okay, well, I have these things as my priority and I'll add Sabbath. No, we still have to go, even though
Mm,
we have those things. How do we set aside that time to be very, very intentional with that 24 hours that we have, or however much time? Sometimes you have competitions. When it's marching band season, Friday nights are football games, Saturdays, travel competition day. So you're like, God, how do we find rest in that? Well, we
hmm.
don't add things onto that time. We'll say, okay, well, there's a birthday party. We can't do that because we don't want to fill that space. If we have time to slow down, we will,
Mm,
and just acknowledging we're away at a competition. Lord, we just thank you for the blessing of the gift you've given our kid that has, this opportunity. And, you know, praying throughout that time, just seeing the beauty of what God is doing in the midst of that. But then other seasons, it's full 24 hours. Tonight, it's full 24 hours. We had things we could do, but we were like, you know what? No, let's take this 24 hours for us in this season. Let's kind of close the doors. Let's feast with our family. Let's spend time in worship and let's just rest. That may
mm,
look like, for me, that's painting. For my husband, he's an IT guy, so he's doing that all week. So for him, that looks like, you know what, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna watch a football game by
mm,
myself. For our oldest, I'm gonna go outside and explore. We're just being intentional with our Sabbath as a family and our Sabbath as, what does God want to speak to me specifically when I'm not feeling it with work, when I'm not feeling it with usual, things to do around the house. This is just, God, I just honor you at this time. And
mm.
so just like you worship with your finances, you're worshiping God with your time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really hard to give up. Like
It
sometimes it's
is.
easier to give the finances than it is the time when we feel like we never have enough of it. Well, we never feel like we have
Right.
enough finances either, but so how is that different than simply just taking time off or practicing self-care?
Ah, we're in a self-care culture right now
Hmm.
that is really confusing caring for ourselves with being consumed with ourselves. And so I have this conversation often. People will say, oh, well, I have a rest day. And the first thing you do is mention all of the stuff they're going to do that they didn't get to do.
To get caught up on. It's your catch-up day. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
But if we were really to be honest and get out a sheet of paper and evaluate how we spent our time, during the week before, you kind of realize, oh, I did actually have a lot of time to do this, but I didn't.
Hmm.
I could have done that here, but instead I was scrolling or instead I was, you know, mind numbing with some activity or whatever. But then there are some times where you realize, oh, I really didn't have the time, but I'm still putting it away anyway. Because we get sometimes to our Sabbath and we go, oh, I didn't, like right now, I have laundry piled up on my floor, just sitting there waiting to be folded. And I can go, I can do that right now, or I can spend that time in community with my spouse. We can sit and we can have the conversations that Sabbath just so beautifully provides because there are no distractions. I don't have my phone with me walking around the house. It's put away, or, my TV is off and I'm just sitting and listening to the birds outside. You find what's important to you during that time to spend with God because you realize this time is worship. This time isn't
Hmm.
just set aside for me to catch up. This is worship. So if I treat this 24 hours in worship, how then will I treat those activities the other days?
Hmm.
You start to see, okay, well, I now get to do my laundry on Tuesday in the middle of the day. And you know what? That time is worship. God wants to speak to me then too.
Hmm.
So Sabbath can't be treated as just a day off because then it won't be an act of worship intentionally. Instead, it'll be a catch up that makes me feel like I've done something. When in fact, what God is asking me to do is to be and let Him do because He still
Hmm.
heals in that time. He restores and He refreshes in that time. But if I feel it, then that doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
so putting aside your, laundry and the different things like that, you kind of recognize God wants to fill this time. What does
Yeah.
he want to do? Not what I've planned, but what does he have planned? So that's 24 hours of saying, God, what do you have planned? Which is hard. It is hard depending on the season you're in.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of Psalm 46:10, right? Be still and know that I am God. Like
Yeah.
he calls us to be still multiple times throughout
Yeah.
scripture. And
Hmm.
I think that, we just don't. We don't have
Yeah.
time to be still, you know?
Right.
Uh, and then when you are still, all that, well, at least for me, it was just a list of the things that I wasn't doing. And,
Right.
like I remember sitting one time, and I've shared this story before, but I was sitting one time outside. It was a beautiful summer morning. I was by myself. My family was doing various whatever they were doing. I had time with the Lord, and all I could think of was, God, this is a waste of time. I have too much to do. And I just
Mm.
remember like the conviction that I had where he was just like, wow, spending time with me is a waste of your time. He's like,
Wow. Yeah.
why? And I just like felt this sadness. And I know that that was from him. And it still makes me
Right.
sad to think that I had that response. But, we get so caught up in our own lives, like you said, like we're so self-focused. And I mean, all of us are, right? Like that's kind of
Yeah.
that fleshly pull. We're all very self-focused and to the exclusion of God. And even though I was thinking that I was prioritizing him, I really
Mm.
wasn't. Like you said, I was adding him to my day where he fit, as opposed to fitting all
Mm.
the things, everything else around him.
Right.
And once I made that shift, like I'm still learning to be still. Like be still is hard.
It's a
It's
lifelong.
wonderful, but it is hard to be
It is.
still.
Yeah.
But it's so worth that practice, and it is. It's life changing. It's health changing. That's really when after that conversation, and I learned to just let go and just be with God and be still and
Mhm.
enjoy those periods of rest that He was giving me.
Right.
And at first, it was not 24 hours. It was just like the little sections of time
Right.
throughout my day, through the week. And then
Right.
that started building until it was like, wow, I can still get all of the things done that I thought I had zero time for and
Right.
still have this time with God and sit and just enjoy. But you build to it, right? It's been two
Yeah.
and a half years in the making and I'm still working on it. So,
Yeah.
but that's really when I started noticing my own health changing.
Yeah.
How about you? So back to your testimony, you started
Hmm.
realizing how your priorities were maybe not where they needed to be as well, as far as
Right.
God versus personal. So how
Absolutely.
did after you started making those switches, what did that look like for you?
Well, when I had dealt with just debilitating anxiety, I recognized for me, a lot of the anxiety was coming from where I was attaching my worth to. So if I
Mm,
wasn't succeeding in some kind of doctoral program, or my kids weren't the top of the class, or my house wasn't spotless, I somehow had to make sure I got those done at the sacrifice of my own rest. And so ultimately, I recognized, oh, okay, God, you attach work to rest for a reason. You didn't separate them as something that you have to pick one or one is
hmm
more valuable than the other. To God, they were both valuable because he knew work would help us to operate in our gifts. It would help us to, having a clean home and having kids who are taken care of and succeeding. That would be a joy for us, but it wasn't supposed to give us value. Like our value in the rest, it's who says it so well. There's a pastor who says it, Rich Velotis. He's a pastor in New York City. He quotes, I forget who it is he quotes exactly, but he says, Sabbath reminds us that we do nothing and yet God still finds us valuable. God
mm,
still loves us. God still cares for us. And I'm sure I got that quote all wrong, but that's what I draw from it as someone who is high achieving and always looking, where can I grow? What can I do next? God created me that way on purpose, but he didn't create me to to find out all that on my own and my own strength separate from him
mm,
to do it until, like, as people say, I'll rest when I die. That's not possible. Like,
mm,
because when you die, like, it's it. Like, yes, if you are with Christ, you'll enter that eternal rest. But here's where we get to practice that. I feel
mhm,
like we can easily miss that this whole life was meant to for us to walk in practice for what eternity would look like, where we have that perfect health, we have that perfect mental, acuity, we have that perfect spiritual oneness with the Father, but we get to
mm,
practice that now if we actually are intentional. And
Yeah.
so I realized I wasn't as intentional, but it was something that I had to learn. It wasn't
Hmm.
something that was ingrained in me. I had never seen anyone practice healthy rhythms. And so it was only going to be natural that my body would eventually go, no, that's enough. Like you can't function at 100% all the time and expect your body to not keep up. I could do all the exercise I want, but it's
Mm,
not going to add up if I'm not operating in the oneness that created me to, where it's time to work and it's time to rest. Like we need
hmm
both.
hmm Yeah. And so how did your health end up changing after you started implementing this change?
I would say that no more anxiety. Like it was
Mm,
completely gone. I thought, okay, I'm definitely going to need the medication to survive this. And God says, if you'll, if you'll really surrender, if you'll really walk this out with me, you'll see that I give you what you need. And so the mental clarity came, the anxiety was gone. Even a lot of the pain and inflammation that I carried in my body, gone
mm,
because I was no longer crashing into Sabbath, burning myself out until Sabbath came. Instead, I was living from the Sabbath
mm,
throughout the week until the next one came. Like I could sense it even in my body. Or even
mm,
on Fridays, I could have a full schedule, and I guarantee you, when Friday comes, it will be clear mostly because I'm leaning. I kind of what I call leaning into the Sabbath. I'm getting my mind, my spirit, and my body all fully ready for whatever God has waiting in that time. If I will commit to it, He will meet me there. And
mm,
so my body has since then feels so rested. Like I sleep probably a good 8 hours solid every day. And I'm
mm.
like, I didn't do that before. I had even right now in perimenopause, I'm sleeping, sweating, but also sleeping. So I can't say that I know everyone who's experienced that. And I can't say, it's just the habit of Sabbath, but no, it's the surrender to it. It's the
Hmm.
surrender to the gift that's already waiting. I didn't have
Yeah.
to work for it, and so my body it's just so rejuvenated every time, by Sunday when our Sabbath is ended the night before, Sunday is like our first day. So we're like, let's do this. You know what I mean? But I can tell when I don't because my body already feels exhausted before I start. And that's how I can tell, oh, I didn't quite lean into that. But I'm grateful
Mm.
for God's grace that He's still waiting and He still will meet you there until the next one.
Mhm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk a lot about priorities and how we prioritize our day and
Mhm.
just making him the very first and the focus of each and every day and how we're spending time with him and what that looks like. And that doesn't mean like 7 hours of Bible study every day, but what it
Right.
does mean is like you're saying that we're focusing in on him even amidst our busyness, even when we're
Yeah.
running errands and all of the things and we're focusing on that peace that
Yeah.
that's what I focus on is just when I'm feeling a little harried and I search for that piece that I know is there
Mhm.
underneath the surface. And sometimes I have to look for it. And when I can't find it easily, I know that I'm doing too much. And that's kind of my cue of,
Mhm.
all right, it's
Yeah.
time to go spend some time with God. I haven't done it enough. 3, 4 days have maybe passed and I haven't done my Bible study or quiet prayer time. It's time to go off into the hills and find him again.
Yeah.
Um, so it doesn't have to look like a dramatic change in
No.
your life overnight because that's just not going to happen. But
No.
it's those little habits. So what are some maybe micro habits or small little easy to add in things that you would suggest for someone who wants to start getting into this but doesn't
Mhm.
really know where to start with that?
It's funny when I think when I started, I kind of went head first, and
Mm.
it took a couple weeks. It actually took my husband to say, you're exhausted from preparing for Sabbath. I think you're
Mm.
doing it wrong. So it really starts with like get rid of a lot of the expectations that you're going to be good at it. I
Mm.
think it sounds crazy, but
It,
I at first was like, oh, I was good at this week, or I wasn't. I was still measuring it based
yeah.
on my idea of what I felt I should get out of it versus it being for God. I was
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, this is another thing I've checked off my list. And so I guess number one would be don't treat Sabbath like something you're checking off your list. But
Mm.
treat it like something that you're accomplishing because that isn't it at all. So you have to approach it with, okay, God, you said that you had rest waiting. I'm here. And then just kind of let it take shape. Season to season will look different. Like I said, some will feel like a full 24 hours filled with just beauty and all of that. And some will look like I fought for the hour of rest that I had,
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it really is trusting God's hand in it, because you can read all the books, you can watch all the things, you can listen to the experts, but it won't replace you really being intentional to meet God there,
Yeah.
And so that's where it has to start with. I'm putting away my list, and I have list upon list upon lists. Like praying to me sometimes feels like there's a party going on and I'm trying to pray in the midst of it because there's a lot of noise. But still, in that time of Sabbath, when I'm leaning into that, I'm recognizing my list can't go with me. This is the place that they can't go. And
Mm.
so for someone that might be their list, for someone that might be all the chores they haven't gotten done, for someone else that might be all the things they wish they could have accomplished. But it's putting that aside and going, God, what do you have here? What do
Mm.
you have here? Because when we do, those other days, those other 6 days, you'll start to get so used to that place that you'll long for that during the week. Like you said,
Mm.
you'll be searching for that peace. For me, I'll be driving in the car and I'll just
Hmm.
feel I just need silence and
Hmm.
just shut everything off and just drive with God. Not necessarily like I have to even have a conversation with him, but just God, I just want to be with you for the next
Mm.
20 minutes, silence, just you and me, just
Mm.
hanging out, and he may speak and he may not. But it's the beauty of his presence. And so
Yeah.
that's really practicing. Sabbath helps you to practice that presence. Practice just being with God without asking for things. And
Yeah.
sure, there's times where you've got those prayers waiting, and that's beautiful too. But I like to really practice God. I don't have an agenda or a list. I have things I'd like to do during Sabbath. I want to paint. I want to eat good food. I want to, hang out with my husband. But mostly I want it to be the approaching what God has, the beauty of what he has waiting. And so I don't know if that's necessarily a list per se, other than put aside your list and kind of just start.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me it was I always find God most when I'm outside in nature. And maybe, if it's wintertime, that's not always as easy, except it can be. Like you just bundle up unless there's a blizzard going on, but you can bundle up and you can go walk outside for 10 minutes and just feel his presence outside. Like that is what worked for me to really start kind of getting into this idea of like I can postpone everything for 10 minutes and go for a walk. Because then in my mind, I was at least doing something. I was getting exercise. And why I had to assign, exercise as opposed to just sitting and being with God, but that was my brain. I was like I
Right.
felt like I was being more productive until I worked through that need to be
Mm,
productive during that time. And then it
yep.
was okay for me to just sit and just be in nature with God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, any for whoever is listening, whatever small thing where you find God the most, I think is probably the best place to start. And you just
Mm,
lean into that time a little bit and try to set aside some time for that every day until it starts to
yeah.
become a little bit more natural and a little
Mhm.
bit more like you start to absorb it, as you said, Natasha. Like
Yeah.
it starts to become something you search for through your day. And when you can't find it, you're overdoing it. And it's
Yeah.
so nice to have that early warning signal so that you're
Yeah.
like, I can't find my peace. I think it's time that
Yeah.
I go sit and spend some extended time with the Lord and rejuvenate myself. And sometimes that happens for me in the middle of the week. There's no
Hmm.
sab like I do put Sunday aside. It's church and then family time and rest time, and I don't do much. But that took me a long time because Sunday was always my catch up day and it was also football
Mm.
day. So I would like do football and then catch up on my chores. And it wasn't very restful though. So I think the biggest thing is just find where you find God the most and just lean into that, as you said, and just start to
Yeah.
make that a habit and it will build on itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. It's beautiful. I find myself praying prayers. I only pray on Sabbath. Things that I'm
Mm,
not even thinking about during the week. I find
hmm.
moment of silence that turn into sometimes I realize I was sitting still for 30 minutes looking out the window and I'm like,
Yeah.
I never do that. And I don't actually even paint naturally. I'm a writer, so painting is so opposite for me, but the
Mm,
challenge of sitting embracing something that's so imperfect for me is just like, God, I can meet you there and find such beauty in I don't have to have it all together all the
mm.
time. And then that spills over
I
into
love
every
it.
day.
Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. I hope this was helpful for those that are listening. Where can people find you if they want to learn more or reach out?
Oh, well, actually, you can find me on my website, sabbathandshalom.com. And so I've got some blogs and different things there, just kind of sharing about living in those rhythms, those everyday rhythms of Sabbath. Um, you can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, under Natasha Tubbs. And yeah,
Awesome. And I'll be linked in the show notes. Um, Natasha, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing your testimony about that. I think this
yeah,
is such an important and overlooked aspect of Scripture that,
absolutely.
God tells us that man isn't made for Sabbath, Sabbath is made for the man.
Right.
And so that can look different. It doesn't have to be 24 hours of no work.
Yeah,
We add it in as we need to. So thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please subscribe for more topics like this, where we focus on bringing our faith and health together for a whole you. If you have questions around your health or your faith, including doubts and struggles with what you've been taught about God, we'd love to have you send us an email at support@psalmmedical.com.